The bitter wind clawed at the tattered remnants of snow, whipping it into stinging flurries that blurred the desolate landscape. A lone collie, a shadow against the stark white, stumbled forward, each weary step a silent plea for respite. His once luxuriant coat, matted with mud and grime, offered little protection against the relentless cold, and his gaunt frame spoke volumes of prolonged hunger. Emaciation had hollowed his cheeks and sharpened the angles of his bones, yet a flicker of stubborn life still glinted in his intelligent amber eyes. He was a creature utterly alone, a solitary survivor in a world ravaged by human conflict, his every movement a testament to a desperate, unyielding will to simply exist. The war had swept through this land like a plague, leaving behind only ruins and an unbearable silence, broken now only by the crunch of his paws on the frozen earth. Unbeknownst to the weary dog, he was not entirely alone. From the ghostly skeletal remains of a frost-bitten forest, a patrol of German soldiers emerged, their breath pluming white in the frigid air. Their heavy boots crunched rhythmically, a stark, metallic sound in the pervasive quiet. These men, hardened by months of relentless fighting, were acutely attuned to their surroundings, their eyes constantly scanning for any anomaly, any sign of danger or opportunity in the desolate expanse. They were a grim, efficient unit, moving with the practiced caution of those who had learned that survival hinged on vigilance. Their rifles were held at the ready, their expressions stoic, etched with the weariness that war inflicted upon all who endured it. The lead soldier, a gruff corporal named Klaus, was the first to spot the movement. His gaze, sharpened by countless patrols through enemy territory, fixed on the distant moving speck. "Halt!" he hissed, raising a gloved hand. The unit froze, instantly alert, their rifles swiveling towards the corporal's line of sight. Klaus pointed with an outstretched finger, his voice a low growl. "There! Movement! What is it?" Squinting against the weak winter sun, the other soldiers peered across the snow-covered field. Slowly, the indistinct form resolved itself into a quadrupedal shape. A dog, clearly. But not just any dog. This one moved with a peculiar grace despite its evident exhaustion, a distinct collie gait even in its weakened state. It was Barnaby, though the Germans had no way of knowing his name, a name whispered with affection in a home that no longer existed, a home obliterated by the very conflict that now pursued him. He was a dog of remarkable intelligence, a trait that had been carefully nurtured by his previous owners, a family that had once cherished him. He understood commands in 2 languages, could fetch specific items on request, and possessed an uncanny ability to read human emotions. Now, all that finely tuned intelligence was focused solely on survival, on finding the next scrap of food, the next moment of warmth. His past life was a series of faded warm images, a child's gentle hand stroking his fur, the comforting scent of a hearth fire, the joyous chase of a thrown stick across a sun-drenched meadow. Those were memories from another world, a peaceful existence shattered by the thundering roar of artillery and the acrid stench of cordite. He had lost his family, scattered or worse, and had found himself adrift in this brutal, unforgiving landscape. Yet even in this desperate state, a spark of that former spirit remained, an innate resilience that drove him onward, one painful step after another. The soldiers, observing the dog's approach, began to close ranks. Corporal Klaus barked orders, his voice carrying clearly on the crisp air. "Spread out. Don't let it get past us." Could be a scout, or worse. The men moved with practiced efficiency, forming a semicircle, slowly but surely cornering the exhausted collie. They saw a stray, certainly, its matted fur and staggering gait unmistakable signs of neglect and hardship. But they also saw a potential unknown, a variable in an already volatile environment. In wartime, even a starving dog could be a tool, a messenger, or an unwitting accomplice in espionage. Paranoia was a survival instinct, honed sharp by brutal experience. Barnaby, sensing the tightening circle, instinctively pulled back, his hackles rising slightly, a soft, warning growl rumbling in his chest. His amber eyes, once full of playful mischief, now held a deep, animalistic fear. These uniformed men, with their grim faces and pointed rifles, were not his family. They were a threat, another obstacle in his impossible quest for safety. He looked for an escape route, his keen senses assessing every possibility, every gap in their formation. But the Germans were too experienced, too disciplined. They maintained their distance, not wanting to spook the animal, yet steadily closing the net. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the scent of fear from the dog and the grim determination of the soldiers. What would they do with him? Would they simply shoot him, another casualty of a war that claimed countless innocent lives? Or did they see something more, something beyond just a hungry stray animal? The dog represented an enigma, a potential resource, or a cleverly disguised threat. In this wasteland, every detail held significance, every encounter a potential turning point. The soldiers eyed him warily, their fingers resting lightly on their triggers. This desolate encounter, a lone dog against a patrol of hardened men, was more than just a fleeting moment in a vast war. It was a prelude, an unwitting intersection of lives that would soon unravel a secret far greater than any of them could imagine. It was a story that demands to be heard, a testament to the unforeseen ways in which even the most insignificant creatures can alter the course of history. To hear more of these compelling narratives, stories of courage, cunning, and the unpredictable turns of fate in history's darkest hours, subscribe to our channel. Join us as we uncover the astonishing truths behind the legends, delving into the gripping tales that have shaped our world. The heavy, sodden snow crunched under the boots of the German patrol as they advanced, their breath pluming in the frigid air. The gaunt, muddy collie, still trembling from the shock of their appearance, watched them with desperate, intelligent eyes. He was cornered against a skeletal birch, its bark stripped by the relentless winter and the gnawing hunger of smaller creatures. Captain Richter, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with the fatigue and suspicion of endless war, raised a gloved hand, halting his men. He surveyed the dog, not with malice, but with a trained wariness that had kept him alive through countless skirmishes. "Hold your positions," Richter commanded, his voice a low rumble. "Astray, perhaps, but keep your weapons ready." His eyes, sharp and cold like chips of ice, never left the animal. He had seen too much in this brutal landscape to trust appearances, especially in a war where even the most innocuous elements could conceal lethal intent. Dogs, he knew, had been employed by all sides, sometimes as messengers, sometimes as beasts of burden for explosives, and sometimes, tragically, as mere lures. This particular collie, however, carried an air of forgotten dignity, a faint echo of a life spent in comfort, now utterly shattered. Private Schmidt, the youngest and most recently deployed member of the patrol, felt a pang of sympathy that war had not yet entirely extinguished. He saw not a potential threat, but a creature suffering, its ribs starkly visible beneath its matted fur, its posture a blend of fear and utter exhaustion. "Captain," Schmidt ventured, his voice softer than appropriate for the harsh environment. "He looks harmless, just hungry." Richter scoffed, a cloud of vapor escaping his lips. "Harmless? In this war, Schmidt, even a snowflake can hide a sniper. Remember what happened near the Ardennes? A farmer's dog, seemingly docile, led a reconnaissance team into an ambush. No, we approach with caution." He gestured to two of his men, motioning for them to fan out, widening the semicircle around the collie. The dog, sensing the closing net, flattened itself against the tree, a low, guttural growl rumbling deep in its chest, more a whimper of despair than a challenge. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the cold and the unspoken question of the dog's fate. Richter considered their options. A bullet would be swift, efficient, and remove any doubt. But something about the collie, Its quiet suffering stayed his hand. It wasn't just a wild animal. Its neatly kept, albeit now filthy, fur suggested a former owner, a home. Killing a domestic animal, even in war, felt like a small, unnecessary savagery. On the other hand, allowing it to roam, if it were indeed a trained messenger, would be an unforgivable oversight. "Private Schmidt," Richter finally said, his gaze still fixed on the dog, "approach it, slowly. See if you can get a lead on it. If it shows any aggression or makes any move that seems unnatural, abort immediately. And do not, under any circumstances, get too close until you are certain." Schmidt swallowed, a knot of apprehension tightening in his stomach, but he nodded. He carefully unslung his rifle, placing it gently in the snow, a gesture meant to signal peaceful intent to the desperate animal. He rummaged in his pack, pulling out a half-eaten piece of hardtack, dry and unappetizing even to a starving man, but it was all he had. He began to move, one slow, deliberate step after another, his eyes fixed on the collie. "Easy, boy," Schmidt murmured, his voice soft, coaxing. "Good dog. Just trying to help." The collie watched him, its head cocked slightly, ears twitching, processing the unfamiliar German words. Its fear was warring with another, more primal instinct, hunger. Its nose twitched, catching the faint scent of the hardtack, a forgotten aroma of sustenance in a world of desolation. It remained pressed against the birch, its muscles coiled, ready to bolt, but it didn't growl again. The stillness in its eyes spoke volumes of a creature pushed to the absolute edge, relying on instinct for survival. Schmidt continued his slow approach, holding out the hardtack in his open palm. "Here, boy. Food." He knelt down about 10 feet away, making himself appear less threatening, less of a towering shadow. The cold seeped into his knees, but he barely noticed. His focus was entirely on the dog, on the delicate balance between its innate caution and its desperate need. He saw a flicker of something in the collie's eyes, a memory, perhaps, of a kind hand, a gentle voice. Or maybe it was just the overwhelming hunger finally overriding its fear. Richter and the other soldiers watched, their rifles still at the ready, their expressions grim. This was a gamble, a small one perhaps, but a gamble nonetheless. Richter chewed on his lip, remembering the intelligence reports of enemy efforts to use animals for covert operations. A dog like this, a collie known for its intelligence and loyalty, would be ideal. He pushed down the flicker of unease, his military pragmatism winning over any nascent sentimentality. If this dog was a threat, Schmidt would discover it, or suffer the consequences. He had to know. The war left little room for error. The wind picked up, swirling snow around them, mirroring the swirling uncertainty in the air. The outcome of this small, frozen standoff remained precariously unknown. The gnawing emptiness in his stomach, a constant companion for weeks, finally superseded Barnaby's ingrained caution. He watched the young soldier, Schmidt, with an intensity that burned through his fear, his intelligent eyes fixed on the outstretched hand. The scent of stale bread, humble yet intoxicating, wafted towards him, a lifeline in this brutal landscape. After a moment that felt like an eternity to the waiting soldiers, Barnaby took a hesitant step forward, then another, his gaunt frame trembling slightly. He reached the offering, snatching the crust gently from Schmidt's fingers, almost apologetically, before retreating a step to devour it with desperate, silent gratitude. This small, brave act of acceptance, driven by profound hunger, subtly shifted the atmosphere amongst the German patrol. Captain Richter, initially rigid with suspicion, found a flicker of something akin to easing in his stern gaze. Even the more hardened veterans, who had advocated for simply culling the canine, exchanged quiet glances, a collective softening in their battle-weary expressions. Private Schmidt, a faint smile touching his lips, extended his hand again, this time not with food, but with an offer of comfort. Slowly, carefully, He began to stroke Barnaby's matted fur, his touch light and reassuring. Barnaby, still wary but no longer panicking, leaned ever so slightly into the contact, a deep, rumbling sigh escaping him. It was a sound of profound relief, a momentary respite in a world that had offered him nothing but hardship. As Schmidt's fingers worked through the dog's coarse coat, attempting to disentangle some of the burrs and dried mud, his brow furrowed. His touch, initially gentle, became more investigative as he encountered something unusual. He paused, his expression shifting from one of tender concern to puzzled curiosity. Running his fingers along Barnaby's spine, just below the shoulder blades, he felt it distinctly, a raised, unusually thick seam in the dog's fur. It wasn't a natural part of the coat, nor did it feel like an old wound. It was too uniform, too deliberate, almost as if something had been stitched into the very lining of the animal's skin, a hidden pocket beneath the surface. Schmidt's curiosity quickly turned to concern. He glanced up at Captain Richter, his eyes wide with an unspoken question. Richter, whose gaze had never truly left the collie despite his momentary relaxation, noticed the change in Schmidt's demeanor immediately. He watched as the private probed the peculiar stitching with a tentative finger. Richter's earlier suspicion, momentarily dulled by Barnaby's docile acceptance of the food, roared back with renewed intensity. His mind, trained for the subtle cues of enemy intelligence, immediately connected the dots. A stray dog, appearing out of nowhere in a contested territory, now displaying an artificial alteration to its coat. The possibility of the animal being a courier, a silent, four-legged messenger, pulsed through his thoughts. "What is it, Schmidt?" Richter's voice cut through the quiet, sharper than before. The other soldiers, attuned to their captain's tone, tensed, their hands instinctively moving closer to their rifles. Barnaby, sensing the shift in mood, whimpered softly, pressing closer to Schmidt's leg, seeking reassurance from the one human who had shown him kindness. Schmidt carefully parted Barnaby's fur, revealing the anomaly more clearly. The stitching was crude but strong, clearly designed to be hidden, camouflaged by the dog's thick coat. It ran for several inches, forming a defined, almost rigid line against Barnaby's skin. "Captain," Schmidt began, his voice low, "there's something sewn into his coat. A seam, sir. It feels deliberate." He traced the line with his thumb, emphasizing its unnatural presence. Richter strode forward, his imposing figure casting a shadow over Barnaby and Schmidt. He knelt, his gloved hand reaching out to examine the stitching himself. His fingers, accustomed to the intricacies of military equipment and the harsh realities of the front, recognized the careful, secretive nature of the needlework. This was no accidental tear or simple repair. This was a concealment. A cold, hard glint entered Richter's eyes. This wasn't merely a stray dog. This was potentially a weapon, a tool of espionage. The enemy was cunning, always seeking new ways to gather intelligence, to bypass their defenses. A dog, seemingly harmless, yet carrying a secret payload? It was a classic, albeit audacious, tactic. His mind raced, calculating the risks, the implications. "Stand back, Private," Richter commanded, his voice now devoid of any previous softening. His suspicion was no longer a flicker. It was a burning certainty. "Schlesinger, keep your rifle trained on the animal. Do not hesitate." Private Schlesinger, a burly soldier with a grim face, nodded, his rifle now aimed squarely at Barnaby, who, despite the sudden tension, remained remarkably still, as if understanding the gravity of the situation unfolding around him. Richter turned back to Schmidt, his gaze unwavering. "Schmidt, you will investigate that seam. Carefully. We need to know what's hidden there, and be ready for anything." The words hung heavy in the frigid air, laden with unspoken threats, and the chilling possibilities of wartime deceit. Barnaby, the unwitting pawn in a deadly game of clandestine warfare, stood at the precipice of discovery, his fate now inextricably linked to the hidden contents within his tattered coat. The moment of truth was at hand. Under Richter's unwavering, intense stare, Private Schmidt carefully began the examination. The weight of his captain's gaze, combined with the ominous click of Schlesinger's rifle preparing to fire, pressed down on him, making his hands feel clumsy yet acutely sensitive. He knelt again, moving slowly, deliberately, to avoid startling Barnaby, who remained surprisingly placid amidst the escalating tension, his soft eyes fixed on Schmidt's face. The dog's trust, earned moments ago with a piece of dried meat, felt like a heavy responsibility. Schmidt reached into his tunic pocket, retrieving a small, well-honed trench knife, its blade dulled from countless battlefield tasks, but still sharp enough for the delicate work ahead. The harsh winter wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of pine and distant wood smoke, but within their small circle, the air was thick with anticipation and the metallic tang of fear. Every soldier present held their breath, their eyes glued to Schmidt's careful movements. Richter stood directly behind Schmidt, his arms crossed, a silent, unmoving sentinel. He watched with hawk-like precision as Schmidt's fingers, surprisingly agile despite the cold, probed the anomalous seam. The threads were thick, made of a coarse, dark material, almost indistinguishable from Barnaby's matted fur. It was clear that whoever stitched this had intended for it to remain a secret, a seamless part of the dog's natural appearance. Schmidt positioned the tip of his knife precisely at one end of the stitching, where the thread seemed to begin. He took a deep, steadying breath, the frosty air burning his lungs. With immense care, he pressed the blade down, severing the first thread. The sound, a tiny, almost imperceptible snip, echoed deafeningly in the silence. Barnaby flinched slightly at the sensation but did not pull away. Schmidt continued, slowly, meticulously, cutting each individual stitch. It was painstaking work, requiring a surgeon's precision, as he was acutely aware that a sudden slip could injure the dog, or worse, prematurely trigger whatever lay hidden within. As he worked, a small dark pouch began to emerge from beneath the dog's thick coat. It was made of oilskin, a material renowned for its waterproofing properties, clearly designed to protect its contents from the elements. The pouch was flat, rectangular, and surprisingly rigid, its size suggesting it held more than just a simple message. The visible portion of the pouch was still partially encased by the remaining stitches, a stubborn secret clinging to its original design. Schmidt's brow furrowed in concentration. He finished cutting the last threads, feeling the material give way. With a gentle tug, the entire pouch was finally free, detaching from the inner lining of Barnaby's coat. The moment it was liberated, the tension in the air ratcheted up another notch. The German soldiers, their eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and morbid curiosity, unconsciously tightened their grips on their weapons. They were entirely on high alert now, every sinew strained, every sense sharpened. The collective expectation was that the pouch would contain something dangerous, perhaps a miniature explosive device, cunningly designed to detonate upon discovery, a final, cruel booby trap from a resourceful enemy. Their weapons remained trained on Barnaby, who, to everyone's astonishment, remained remarkably calm. He sat patiently, his tail giving a slow, almost imperceptible wag, his presence a stark contrast to the coiled tension of the men surrounding him. It was as if he understood the gravity of the situation, the weight of the moment, and accepted his role in it with stoic dignity. Perhaps, Schmidt thought, he had been through this before, a carrier accustomed to the silent scrutiny of suspicious hands. Richter, his voice a low growl that barely disturbed the winter stillness, ordered, "Open it, Schmidt. Slowly." His command was absolute, leaving no room for hesitation. He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing, ready to react at the slightest sign of trouble. The other soldiers braced themselves, their fingers hovering over triggers, prepared for an explosion, a sudden blinding flash, or some other insidious trick. The air crackled with a silent, almost unbearable suspense. Schmidt's hands, trembling slightly now, held the oilskin-wrapped package. It was heavier than he expected, substantial. He examined the outer layer. The oilskin was tightly bound with a thin piece of twine, meticulously knotted. This was not a hasty concealment. It was the work of someone who understood the importance of protecting their payload. With deliberate, painstaking movements, he began to untie the twine. His fingers fumbled slightly with the cold, but he persisted, his focus absolute. The twine eventually loosened, and he carefully unwound it from around the package. The final layer, the tightly bound oilskin, was now accessible. Schmidt peeled back the first fold, then the second, revealing not a mechanism, not a fuse, not even a glint of metal. What emerged was a stack of papers, crisply folded, their edges sharp. The tension in the air, thick enough to cut, began to shift, evolving from outright fear of explosion to a different kind of apprehension. It was no longer about immediate physical danger, but about the unknown, the implications of what these papers might reveal. Schmidt's heart hammered against his ribs as he slowly, carefully, began to pull the small, oilskin-wrapped package entirely free from its binding, revealing its complete, unassuming contents to the expectant, watchful eyes of the German patrol. All eyes were on the bundle, their collective breath held, waiting for the truth to be unveiled. The revelation was imminent. With Richter's firm command ringing in his ears, Private Schmidt, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs, knelt beside Barnaby once more. The collie shivered slightly, a sympathetic tremor passing through his lean frame, as if sensing the immense pressure now weighing upon the young soldier. Schmidt's hands, usually steady and precise, trembled ever so slightly as he drew his trench knife, its dull blade reflecting the weak winter light. He carefully positioned the tip of the knife against the sturdy, almost coarse stitching that formed the hidden seam. The other soldiers stood in a tight, watchful semicircle, their rifles leveled, their breath fogging in the cold air, every eye fixed on Schmidt's deliberate movements. Richter stood directly behind him, a palpable aura of intense expectation emanating from him. "Easy, Private," Richter murmured, his voice a low rumble. "Don't damage anything inside. We need whatever it is intact." Schmidt nodded, swallowing hard. The responsibility felt immense. This wasn't merely cutting a thread. It was potentially uncovering a secret that could alter the course of their immediate future, perhaps even the larger conflict. He gently inserted the knife's tip under a loop of thread, and with a soft snip, severed it. He repeated the action, slowly, meticulously, working his way along the entire length of the seam. The fabric of the coat, worn and thin in places, reluctantly gave way, revealing a small, carefully concealed pouch sewn into the lining. It was a crude but effective piece of craftsmanship, designed to be inconspicuous against the dog's matted fur. The pouch was made of oilskin, gleaming faintly in the meager light, its surface smooth and waterproof. It promised protection for its contents, hinting at their importance. Schmidt's fingers, now more accustomed to the task, carefully pried open the small flap of the pouch. The air crackled with unspoken suspense. The soldiers leaned forward, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and grim curiosity. What surprise did the enemy have in store for them? An explosive? A chemical agent? A propaganda leaflet designed to sow dissent? Each man had faced the brutal unpredictability of war too many times to rule out any possibility, no matter how outlandish. Barnaby, sensing the tension, remained perfectly still, his intelligent eyes darting between Schmidt's focused face and Richter's unyielding stare. With a final, delicate pull, Schmidt extracted a tightly rolled bundle from the oilskin pouch. It was surprisingly compact, yet felt substantial in his hand. He carefully unrolled it, his gaze sweeping over the contents. His breath hitched. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a bomb. It was a series of meticulously drawn maps, several pages of dense, handwritten text, and a number of coded tables. The documents, printed on thin, high-quality paper, were clearly military in nature. He recognized the distinctive topographical markings, the symbols for troop deployments, the familiar grid lines. "Captain, these are maps," Schmidt whispered, his voice tinged with incredulity. He quickly flattened one of the larger sheets against the snowy ground, holding it steady with both hands. Richter immediately dropped to one knee, his eyes scanning the detailed drawing. The intricate lines and symbols on the map spoke volumes. He recognized the terrain, a critical sector of the front lines, and his expert eye instantly identified the markings detailing enemy positions, supply lines, and, most damningly, arrows indicating projected movements. "Himmel!" Richter breathed, a sudden gasp escaping his lips. His expression, usually stoic and unreadable, contorted into a mask of stunned realization, quickly followed by a flash of cold fury. This wasn't just any intelligence. This was the enemy's battle plan, laid bare before them. He quickly snatched the other documents from Schmidt, unrolling them with practiced haste. The handwritten text detailed troop strengths, specific unit designations, dates, and times. The coded tables were clearly communication frequencies or decryption keys. "These are battle plans," Richter stated, his voice now a low, dangerous growl. "Precise, detailed, a full offensive." His gaze snapped up, meeting Schmidt's eyes with an intensity that made the younger soldier flinch. "They outline a flanking maneuver, Schmidt. A major push, designed to bypass our northern defenses, to encircle our positions in the Ardennes forest." He pointed a gloved finger at a particular section of the map, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Here, a coordinated assault, timed for the coming days. They intended to hit us there, when we were least prepared, when they believed our lines would be thinnest." The full gravity of the discovery settled over the small group of soldiers like an icy shroud. This wasn't just a document. It was a premonition of disaster, averted by the accidental delivery of their own secrets. Richter's mind, a finely tuned military instrument, immediately began to process the implications. This flanking maneuver, if successful, would have been catastrophic. It would have punched a gaping hole in their lines, led to massive casualties, and potentially destabilized the entire front. They had been mere days, perhaps even hours, from being caught completely off guard, utterly blind to the enemy's true intentions. The enemy had gambled, sending these vital plans via an unassuming animal, a risk that had now backfired spectacularly. These documents, transported by a stray collie, were an unexpected gift, an intelligence coup of monumental proportions. The element of surprise, the most crucial component of any successful offensive, had been irrevocably lost to the enemy. With these plans in their possession, the German High Command would know exactly where and when the attack was coming. They would be ready. The enemy, unknowingly, had just handed them the tactical advantage, turning their carefully laid trap into a glaring vulnerability. The tables had been turned, and the instrument of their adversary's downfall was a hungry, bedraggled collie. The profound irony was not lost on Richter. The enemy, believing they were delivering a devastating blow, had essentially sown the seeds of their own blindness into the coat of a forgotten dog. Richter's orders had been sharp, precise, leaving no room for hesitation. The small, oilskin-wrapped package, now resting in his gloved hand, was a cold, hard fact, far more dangerous than any weapon they could have imagined. His mind, a finely tuned instrument of war, immediately began to process the implications, connecting disparate pieces of information with chilling speed. This was not merely a discovery, it was a revelation. He turned the packet over, his eyes scanning its unblemished surface, then met Schmidt's gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the weight they now carried. The quiet professionalism that had defined Richter's command now shifted into a frenzied yet controlled urgency. Time, he knew, was of the essence. Schlesinger, secure the perimeter. No one in, no one out until I give the word. Richter barked, his voice carrying the newfound authority of a man gripped by a sudden, profound understanding. Schmidt, you come with me. The rest of you, maintain your positions. Eyes open. The unit, well drilled and disciplined, moved with practiced efficiency. Schlesinger positioned himself strategically, his rifle sweeping the desolate landscape, while the other soldiers formed a tight cordon around their position, their faces grim, anticipating the next command. Barnaby, still unnervingly calm, watched the flurry of activity, an innocent bystander to the unfolding drama he had inadvertently set in motion. Richter wasted no time. He led Schmidt a short distance away, seeking a momentary semblance of privacy amidst the stark, open terrain. With a decisive movement, he unwrapped the oilskin. The contents were instantly recognizable, a collection of maps, meticulously drawn and annotated, alongside several sheets of tightly written intelligence reports. As his eyes scanned the documents, a single, sharp intake of breath escaped him. The maps detailed troop movements, not just a vague idea, but specific company designations, projected routes, and estimated timings. The reports, written in the enemy's cipher, but containing critical operational markings, spoke of supply lines, artillery placements, and most damningly, a comprehensive plan for a large-scale flanking maneuver. This wasn't just reconnaissance. This was their entire strategic blueprint for the coming offensive. "My God," Richter whispered, the words escaping him almost involuntarily, a rare crack in his stoic demeanor. This was the offensive they had been anticipating, but its specific details had remained elusive, shrouded in the fog of war. Now, laid bare before him, was the enemy's hand, their carefully constructed trap exposed down to the very last detail. The flanking maneuver, in particular, sent a shiver down his spine. It was audacious, brilliant in its conception, designed to bypass their heavily fortified front lines and strike deep into their rear, cutting off supply routes and creating utter chaos. Had this dog not stumbled into their path, had Schmidt not possessed that fleeting moment of compassion, they would have been caught completely unaware. Thousands of lives, perhaps the outcome of this entire sector, hinged on this very moment. Richter barked commands, his voice now imbued with a furious energy. "Schmidt, take Barnaby. Keep him safe. Keep him warm. He is to be treated with utmost care." Then, turning to the nearest soldier, a runner known for his speed and endurance, Richter thrust the documents into his hand. "You, to command. Now, do not stop for anything. Tell them Richter sends this, and it is urgent. Lives depend on your speed." The young soldier, his eyes wide with the sudden responsibility, saluted crisply and sprinted off, a dark silhouette against the pale, snowy horizon, the fate of an entire battle nestled precariously within the folds of his coat. The discovery immediately sent ripples through the German command structure. The intelligence, validated by its specificity and the unusual means of its delivery, triggered a rapid reassessment of their tactical situation. The enemy, who had believed their plans to be a closely guarded secret, was now, effectively, blinded. Their carefully laid trap, designed to exploit the element of surprise, was exposed. The intricate web of deception they had woven, intended to mislead and confuse, was now nothing more than a tangled mess, its threads visible for all to see. The anticipation, the strategic advantage they had meticulously cultivated, vanished in an instant. The German High Command, receiving the intelligence, moved with unparalleled swiftness. Countermeasures were immediately set in motion. Defensive lines were bolstered in anticipation of the now known flanking attack. Artillery positions were adjusted, troop deployments reconfigured, and reserves mobilized to meet the threat head-on, no longer guessing, but knowing. The enemy's planned offensive, once a potent, unseen dagger, was now merely a blunt instrument, its edge dulled by the piercing light of truth. They would still attack,
that was certain, but they would do so against an enemy fully prepared, forewarned, and thus forearmed. Barnaby, utterly oblivious to the strategic earthquake he had caused, curled up beside Schmidt, content with the warmth and the occasional scratch behind his ears. He had sought food and shelter, a simple act of survival, and in doing so, had unwittingly become a pivotal figure in the war.
This stray collie, muddy and emaciated, had delivered the enemy's own secrets directly into the hands of those they sought to defeat. He had, with his silent, four-legged courier service, turned the tide of an impending battle, preventing a catastrophic surprise attack. The enemy, who had invested so much in their secrecy, now faced a vastly different battlefield, all thanks to a forgotten dog and the hidden seams in his coat. The true impact of his intervention, the prevention of an impending catastrophe, was only just beginning to unfold. The profound implications of Barnaby's unwitting delivery rippled outward, transforming the strategic landscape with astonishing speed. The German command, having verified the critical intelligence, wasted no time. What was once a blueprint for a devastating enemy flanking maneuver became a detailed roadmap for their own defensive and offensive adaptations. Within hours, troop movements were initiated, repositioning crucial units to intercept the anticipated thrust. Artillery batteries, previously positioned for general defense, were retargeted with surgical precision, aiming at the very coordinates revealed in the stolen plans. Reserves, held back for uncertain contingencies, were now fully integrated into the revised battle plan, their deployment strategically timed to counter the enemy's expected advances. This rapid, decisive action had immediate, tangible consequences on the ground. The planned flanking maneuver, intended to exploit a perceived weakness in the German lines, was met not with surprise and disarray, but with an impenetrable wall of resistance. As enemy forces cautiously began their movement, expecting to find sparse opposition, they instead encountered well-entrenched positions, fortified with unexpected strength. The element of surprise, their most potent weapon, had been entirely neutralized. Assaults that should have rolled over unprepared defenses were met with heavy, concentrated fire, forcing them to bog down, sustain heavy casualties, and eventually to retreat in disarray. The intelligence Barnaby carried had not merely warned them, it had provided the blueprint for victory in that critical engagement, preventing countless German casualties and safeguarding a vital sector of the front line. Captain Richter, a man of rigid discipline and unyielding resolve, found himself wrestling with an unexpected surge of respect, and dare he admit, affection for the scruffy collie. He watched Barnaby, now enjoying a hearty meal provided by the mess hall, with a gaze that softened imperceptibly. The dog, once a symbol of the desperate, unforgiving nature of war, had become an accidental harbinger of salvation. Richter, who had initially ordered Barnaby either killed or treated with extreme caution, now issued new, unequivocal directives concerning the dog's welfare. "This animal," he announced to his unit, his voice betraying a hint of uncharacteristic warmth, "is no longer just a stray. He is a valued asset to the Reich. He will be fed, he will be sheltered, and he will be treated with the respect he has earned. Anyone found mistreating this dog will answer directly to me." Private Schmidt, who had been Barnaby's first advocate, beamed with a quiet pride. He understood the profound shift in Richter's perspective, and felt a deep, personal connection to the animal, whose life he had, in a small way, helped to save. Barnaby, now surrounded by a coterie of soldiers eager to offer a scrap of food or a friendly pat, seemed to thrive under the newfound attention. His ribs were less prominent. His coat, though still matted in places, had begun to regain some of its former luster, and his eyes, once haunted by starvation, now held a sparkle of contentment and trust. He had gone from a nameless, hunted creature to a recognized, if unofficial, member of the unit. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone. A starving stray, driven by the basic instinct for survival, had stumbled into history, becoming the unlikely instrument of a major intelligence coup. The enemy's sophisticated espionage, their carefully cultivated network of human couriers and coded messages, had been bypassed by the simplest, most unassuming of messengers. They had invested vast resources in maintaining secrecy, only to have their most vital plans revealed by a dog whose primary concern was his next meal. It highlighted the unpredictable nature of warfare, where the grandest strategies could be undone by the smallest, most unforeseen variables. Barnaby's quiet heroism became a whispered legend among the troops. The dog that had fooled the enemy, the animal that carried secrets that turned the tide of battle, the collie who blinded an entire offensive. He became a symbol, not of grand military might, but of the unexpected, resilient spirit that could emerge from the most desperate circumstances. The soldiers, hardened by the brutal realities of the front, found a strange solace in Barnaby's presence. He was a tangible reminder that even in the darkest hours, hope could appear in the most unexpected forms, and that sometimes the greatest heroes wear no uniforms and carry no weapons, only the quiet courage of their hearts. Richter, observing the morale boost Barnaby inadvertently provided, understood his value extended beyond the intelligence he had delivered. The dog had become a mascot, a living embodiment of their unexpected victory and a source of quiet comfort in the bleakness of war. He saw Barnaby not just as a dog, but as a testament to the unpredictable currents of fate that shaped their lives. The animal represented a turning point, a moment when the tide had begun to shift, and for that, Richter knew, Barnaby deserved every ounce of care and respect they could offer. He was an accidental hero, a testament to the fact that even the most vulnerable could possess the power to alter the course of history, blindfolding an enemy that believed itself all-seeing and invincible. The immediate threat posed by the enemy's planned offensive was neutralized with decisive precision. The German forces, now fully apprised of the flanking maneuver, executed a brilliant defensive strategy, turning the tables on their adversaries. The enemy's advance, once intended as a lightning strike, faltered against prepared positions and coordinated counterattacks. Casualties, which would have been catastrophic had the element of surprise remained, were significantly reduced on the German side, while the attacking forces suffered immense losses, their audacious plan crumbling under the weight of foreknowledge. It was a victory forged not through brute strength alone, but through timely intelligence and the swift, intelligent adaptation of tactics. The war effort, at least in this crucial sector, had shifted dramatically, all because of an unexpected messenger. Barnaby, the silent catalyst of this strategic upheaval, remained blissfully unaware of the profound impact he had wrought. He nestled closer to Private Schmidt, who had, without conscious thought, begun to call him by that very name. The private, whose initial act of kindness had set this chain of events in motion, found solace and a strange companionship in the collie's presence. The dog, once a symbol of the war's desolation, had become an anchor of warmth and a quiet testament to unexpected connections in a brutal landscape. Richter, observing the bond forming between man and dog, and recognizing Barnaby's invaluable contribution, had formalized the arrangement. "He stays with you, Schmidt," the captain had decreed, his stern features softening almost imperceptibly. "He's earned his place." And so, Barnaby, the stray collie, found a new home, not in a cozy farmhouse or a bustling city, but amidst the harsh realities of a German military unit. He became Schmidt's constant shadow, his loyal companion through the mud, the snow, and the relentless echoes of distant gunfire. His days of scrounging for scraps were over. He was fed, cared for, and perhaps most importantly, loved. The tale of Barnaby, the collie who had unwittingly turned the tide of a battle, spread slowly through the ranks, a whispered legend of canine heroism. It was a stark reminder that in the crucible of war, heroism could manifest in the most extraordinary and unassuming forms. A creature driven by the primal urge for survival, a victim of circumstance, had transcended his plight to become a silent victor. His story became a small, flickering flame of hope and wonder in the overwhelming darkness of conflict, illustrating that even in the most brutal of human endeavors, there existed space for incredible, almost miraculous intervention. Barnaby's journey, from an emaciated, forgotten wanderer to a cherished member of a military unit, resonated deeply with the soldiers. Many of them, like Barnaby, had been ordinary beings thrust into extraordinary, terrifying circumstances, forced to find resilience and purpose beyond their wildest imaginings. His presence served as a constant, gentle reminder of the world beyond the trenches, of loyalty, and of the simple, enduring power of compassion. Private Schmidt, who had been the first to extend a hand, found his own spirits lifted by Barnaby's unwavering devotion. In the dog's trusting eyes, he saw not the horrors of war, but a flicker of the humanity they were fighting to preserve. The Collie, an accidental hero, embodied the profound truth that sometimes the greatest impact comes from the smallest, most unexpected places. He had not fired a shot, nor stormed a trench, yet his role in preventing a devastating defeat was undeniable. His very existence, from the torn lining of his coat to the hopeful wag of his tail, underscored a fundamental, often overlooked aspect of warfare: that intelligence, and the means by which it is gathered, can be as powerful as any weapon. The war would continue its relentless march, and countless other battles would be fought, but the memory of Barnaby and the blindness he inflicted upon the enemy would endure. His story, a poignant blend of chance, canine instinct, and human empathy, served as a powerful allegory for the unpredictable nature of conflict and the surprising sources of courage and salvation. It was a testament to the fact that even in the bleakest of times, a flicker of hope, a moment of profound impact, can emerge from the most unlikely of beings. Barnaby, the stray collie, a witness to the depths of human cruelty, had also, through his simple existence, become a beacon of unexpected triumph. He was a silent victor, his legacy woven into the very fabric of that winter campaign, a testament to the unexpected heroism that war, in its own terrible way, sometimes reveals. And so, his tale concludes, but the echoes of its message resonate. We hope you found this historical narrative as compelling as we did. If Barnaby's incredible journey moved you, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives on these forgotten moments in history. And don't forget to subscribe and tap that notification bell, because next time we delve into another remarkable untold story from the annals of the past. The incredible true account of a secret message carried by pigeons across enemy lines. A tale of feathered bravery that defied all odds. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, history is always more extraordinary than fiction. The biting wind whipped across the desolate, snow-covered landscape, a stark white canvas scarred by the dark strokes of war. Every skeletal tree stood as a grim sentinel, its branches bare and brittle against the leaden sky. Through this frozen tableau, a lone figure moved with a haunting, almost spectral gait. A collie, once magnificent, now a mere shadow of his former self. His fur, matted with mud and ice, clung to painfully protruding ribs. Each step was a battle against exhaustion and an agonizing hunger that gnawed incessantly at his gut. His intelligent eyes, once bright with playful curiosity, now held a deep, weary sorrow, reflecting the harsh reality of a world turned upside down. He stumbled, regained his footing with a desperate whimper, and pushed onward, driven by an instinct for survival that defied the very bleakness surrounding him. This was Barnaby, though no one in this forsaken land knew his name. His lineage spoke of rolling green hills, of sheep herding with an almost poetic grace, and of a warm hearth where he was a cherished companion. He was known for his sharp mind, his uncanny ability to anticipate commands, and a loyalty that ran as deep as the ancient rivers of his homeland. His past was a tapestry woven with sunshine and laughter, with the gentle touch of a child's hand and the reassuring voice of his master. But war, that indiscriminate devourer of normalcy, had shredded that tapestry, leaving him adrift, a refugee in his own world. The familiar scent of home had long since faded, replaced by the acrid stench of smoke, the metallic tang of blood, and the omnipresent cold that seeped into his bones. He craved the simple comfort of a full belly, the security of a roof overhead, but mostly he yearned for the touch of a kind hand, a sign that the world hadn't entirely forgotten what tenderness felt like. His journey had been long and arduous, a testament to an incredible resilience that even he didn't fully comprehend. He navigated craters and debris, instinctively avoiding the metallic skeletons of fallen machinery, his senses acutely tuned to any hint of danger or, more hopefully, food. Suddenly, the rhythmic crunch of boots on snow broke the deathly silence. A patrol of German soldiers, their figures cloaked in heavy field-gray uniforms and helmets, emerged from behind a cluster of shattered trees. Their breaths plumed in the frigid air, their rifles held close, their eyes scanning the bleak horizon with practiced vigilance. They were weary, hardened men, accustomed to the endless drudgery and sudden horrors of the front. Their faces, etched with fatigue, betrayed little emotion, yet their stance was alert, every muscle coiled for potential action. One of them, a burly corporal with a scarred cheek, was the first to spot the movement. "Halt!" he barked, his voice rough. The entire patrol froze, weapons raised slightly, their gaze fixed on the anomaly in the snow. Barnaby, hearing the harsh command, instinctively flattened himself against the icy ground, his body trembling, not just from the cold, but from a primal fear. He recognized the human shape, the uniforms, the scent of men on patrol, but these were not his people. These were the enemy, or at least the unfamiliar faces who had brought such chaos to his world. He had learned to be wary, to avoid all humans, for they were the source of the terrifying explosions and the incessant, deafening roar that had driven him from his home. He whined softly, a low, pleading sound that was barely audible above the whistling wind. To the soldiers, he was just a stray dog, a shaggy, mud-caked apparition in the snow. But they were soldiers first and foremost, trained to see every variable, every living thing, as a potential threat or a resource. In this war, even a starving dog could be a harbinger of danger, or perhaps an unexpected opportunity. The corporal signaled to his men, and they fanned out, forming a cautious semicircle, slowly, deliberately, closing in on the cowering animal. Their movements were precise, practiced. They saw an emaciated collie, clearly lost, seemingly harmless, yet their training dictated they approach nothing without suspicion. The war had taught them that even the most innocuous-looking things could hide deadly secrets. Barnaby's heart hammered against his ribs. He was cornered, helpless, utterly vulnerable. He braced himself for whatever was to come, his intelligence telling him this was an inescapable bind. His instincts screamed at him to run, to bite, to defend himself. But his body was too weak, his spirit too broken from months of relentless struggle. He simply lay there, shivering, his gaze fixed on the approaching boots, awaiting his fate. In this grim theater of war, where humanity often seemed lost in the shadows, Barnaby's desperate struggle for survival was about to take an unimaginable turn. This starving, shell-shocked collie, unknowingly, carried a secret that would shake the very foundations of an impending battle and blind the enemy to their own meticulously laid plans. Stick with us, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the unfolding chapters of this incredible, true historical narrative. You won't believe what this dog was carrying, or how it changed the course of the war. The biting wind whipped around them, carrying fine particles of snow that stung their faces as the German soldiers cautiously approached the trembling collie. Each step was measured, their heavy boots crunching on the icy ground, creating a stark, almost theatrical silence in the desolate landscape. Barnaby, a raw bundle of fear and instinct, watched them through narrowed eyes, his tail tucked so tightly between his legs it seemed to vanish. He was clearly a domestic animal, not a wild wolf, his posture betraying a history of human interaction. Yet the war had stripped away all sense of security. His emaciated frame suggested prolonged starvation, an outline of ribs starkly visible beneath his matted, muddy fur. The soldiers, veterans of countless skirmishes, knew better than to underestimate anything in this environment. A seemingly harmless stray could carry disease, or worse, could be a distraction, a trap. Captain Richter, his face hardened by years of conflict, motioned for his men to spread out, maintaining a perimeter. His eyes, cold and calculating, assessed the dog. "Be careful, men," he rasped, his voice low and gravelly. "It could be rabid, or worse, a courier." Richter harbored a deep distrust of anything out of place. He had witnessed firsthand the cunning methods employed by the enemy, seen animals used as unwitting carriers of messages, or even as explosive delivery systems. His experience had taught him that in war, sentimentality was a luxury one could ill afford. He saw not a pitiful creature, but a potential enemy asset, or at the very least, a nuisance that could compromise their position. The other soldiers, equally wary, kept their rifles at the ready, their gazes fixed on Barnaby. The dog, sensing their apprehension, flattened himself further against the frozen earth, a low, guttural whimper escaping his throat. He looked utterly defeated, a stark contrast to the lively, playful collie he once was. Yet, beneath the fear, there was an unmistakable spark, a flicker of intelligence in his dark eyes that hinted at a spirit not entirely broken. Among the patrol was Private Schmidt, a younger soldier, barely out of his teens, whose face still held a hint of youthful idealism that the war hadn't quite managed to extinguish. Unlike Richter, Schmidt saw the dog's desperation, the haunting echo of a life lost, much like the lives many of them had left behind. He remembered his own childhood pet, a scruffy terrier named Max, and a pang of sympathy tightened his chest. "Captain," Schmidt ventured, his voice a little shaky. "He just looks hungry, not aggressive." Richter shot him a stern glance. "Looks can be deceiving, Private. This war teaches you that much, if nothing else." He didn't dismiss Schmidt outright, but his skepticism was clear. "However," he conceded, "if he's not a threat, he might be a source of something." His eyes swept the barren landscape, considering the implications of a dog appearing so far from any habitation. Schmidt, encouraged by the slight softening in his captain's tone, took a small, almost imperceptible step forward. His rifle remained slung across his back, his hands held open, palms visible, an ancient gesture of peace. The other soldiers watched, their tension palpable, but no one stopped him. Barnaby, still huddled low, tracked Schmidt's every move, his ears twitching. He didn't growl, didn't snap. He simply watched, a mixture of terror and curiosity in his gaze. Very slowly, carefully, Schmidt reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small, hard piece of dried sausage, part of his own meager rations. It was a precious commodity, but the sight of the starving dog stirred something deep within him. He held it out, extending his arm slowly, deliberately, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "Here, boy," he murmured, his voice soft, coaxing. "Good boy. Come on." Barnaby's nostrils flared, catching the distant, tantalizing scent of food. His head lifted slightly. His tail gave a tiny, almost imperceptible wag, a ghost of its former enthusiasm. Hunger clawed at his stomach, a constant gnawing pain he had endured for days. Yet fear still held him captive. He had learned to distrust humans, to associate their presence with sudden loud noises, with explosions, with the endless, terrifying chaos that had become his world. He hesitated, torn between instinct and terror, a silent battle raging within his famished body. The sausage, humble though it was, represented a sliver of hope, a memory of kindness in a world that had become brutally unkind. But the men surrounding him, their weapons glinting in the pale winter light, represented an unknown danger. His body trembled, not just from the cold, but from the immense internal conflict. He wanted to eat, yearned for it, but the memory of betrayal and abandonment was a powerful deterrent. He remained frozen, his eyes darting between the offered food and the stern faces of the soldiers, particularly Captain Richter's unyielding stare. The standoff continued, a silent tableau of suspicion, desperation, and a fragile, burgeoning compassion in the heart of a war-torn wilderness. Driven by an instinctual hunger that overshadowed his lingering fear, Barnaby finally took the offered morsel from Private Schmidt's outstretched hand. The small piece of dried sausage, a precious commodity in the meager rations, vanished in a single gulp, followed by a tentative lick of Schmidt's fingers. It was a minuscule act, yet in the harsh, unforgiving landscape of war, it was a profound gesture of trust. A ripple of quiet relief passed through the small German patrol. The tension that had held them rigid moments before, contemplating whether to dispatch the scruffy animal, softened ever so slightly. Barnaby, emboldened by the taste of food and the unexpected kindness, nudged his head against Schmidt's palm, a silent plea for more. Schmidt, a young man barely out of his teens, felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling alien to the brutal realities of the front. He gently stroked the collie's matted fur, tracing the contours of its bony frame. The dog's intelligent eyes, previously darting with apprehension, now settled on Schmidt with a nascent adoration. As his fingers worked through the thick, mud-caked fur around Barnaby's neck and chest, Schmidt's brow furrowed. There was an unusual rigidity, an almost unnatural stiffness beneath the grime. His touch, initially exploratory, became more deliberate. He felt a raised line, a pronounced seam, much thicker and more uniform than any natural fold or scar tissue. It ran along the dog's underside, extending from behind its front legs to its hindquarters, a deliberate stitchwork concealed beneath layers of dirty fur. Captain Richter, stoic and observant, had been watching the interaction with a hawk's keen eye. He had witnessed the dog's cautious acceptance of the food, the subtle shift in its demeanor. But it was Schmidt's suddenly intense focus on Barnaby's coat that snagged his full attention. Richter's cynicism, honed by years of combat and intelligence work, immediately flared. He had seen too many tricks, too many seemingly innocent things used as conduits for enemy operations. Spies hid messages in everything from hollowed-out shoe heels to carrier pigeons disguised as common fowl. His eyes narrowed, the glimmer of suspicion transforming rapidly into a hard, unwavering stare. "What is it, Private?" Richter's voice cut through the cold air, devoid of inflection, yet carrying an unmistakable edge of authority that made Schmidt flinch. Schmidt looked up, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Captain, there's something odd here. A thick seam. It feels like something is sewn into his coat, beneath the fur." He gestured vaguely along Barnaby's flank. The collie, sensing the shift in human mood, tensed slightly, its ears swiveling. Richter stood up straight, his gaze fixed on Barnaby, then on Schmidt's hand still resting on the dog. His mind, always racing ahead, connected the dots with chilling speed. A stray dog, found in no man's land, emaciated but somehow still alive, and now, a hidden seam. The pieces clicked into place with an ominous finality. This was no mere coincidence. This was too precise, too deliberate to be anything but a deliberate act. The image of the dog as a starving, innocent creature evaporated, replaced by the chilling possibility of a cunning, biological courier. "Let me see," Richter commanded, his voice now sharper, more urgent. He knelt beside Schmidt, pushing aside the thick fur with an almost aggressive movement. His gloved fingers traced the raised line Schmidt had described. The seam was indeed there, expertly hidden, remarkably sturdy, suggesting it was meant to withstand considerable wear and tear. It wasn't just a mend, it felt like an internal pouch, a clandestine pocket crafted with purposeful intent. The implication sent a cold shiver down his spine. The enemy was using animals right under their noses to transport, what, maps? Orders? Explosives? His suspicion, once a nagging thought, now solidified into a certainty. This dog was not merely a lost pet, it was a sophisticated instrument of espionage, a four-legged secret agent. A sudden, almost primal anger surged within him, directed not at the dog itself, but at the enemy's audacity, their constant ingenuity in finding new ways to infiltrate and deceive. The thought that they might have almost dismissed this animal, perhaps even killed it, without uncovering its true purpose, made his jaw clench. "Private Schmidt, you will investigate this further," Richter ordered, his voice clipped and precise. There was no room for hesitation, no space for sentimentality. The war had taught him that. Carefully, we need to know what's inside, and be extremely cautious. We have no idea what we are dealing with. His eyes swept over the other soldiers who had drawn closer, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and renewed apprehension. "Keep your distance, men, and keep your weapons ready. This animal could be carrying anything." The chill of the barren landscape seemed to intensify, wrapping around them, a stark reminder of the ever-present dangers in this brutal, unforgiving conflict. Barnaby, sensing the shift in their mood, the sudden resurgence of suspicion, whimpered softly, pressing himself closer to Schmidt, his haven in this sudden resurgence of human tension. The trust, so carefully built with a single morsel, now hung precariously in the frigid air. Under Richter's unyielding gaze, Schmidt carefully began his examination. The captain's intensity was a palpable force, pressing down on the young private, making his hands tremble slightly as he reached for the hidden seam. The other soldiers, now arrayed in a semicircle around them, kept their rifles at the ready, their eyes darting between the dog and their commanding officer, a silent, tense tableau against the stark white backdrop of the snow. Barnaby, perhaps sensing the apprehension that radiated from the men, had pressed himself even closer to Schmidt's side, a silent plea for reassurance in the face of their renewed vigilance. His soft brown eyes, once full of a cautious hope, now reflected a flicker of the old fear. Schmidt drew a small, well-worn utility knife from his belt. Its blade, though dull from years of field use, was still sharp enough for the delicate task at hand. He gingerly worked the tip beneath the tightly woven threads that formed the peculiar seam. The stitching was remarkably intricate, a testament to skilled hands, designed to blend seamlessly with the collie's thick winter coat. It was a clear sign of professional work, not a hasty repair by a desperate owner. Each snip of thread was deliberate, precise, a small, almost surgical operation performed under the harsh scrutiny of the battlefield. The metallic click of the blade against the thread was unnaturally loud in the frozen air, each sound deepening the silence that had fallen over the patrol. As the threads began to give way, revealing the layers of fabric beneath, a small bulging pouch became visible. It was crafted from a durable dark canvas expertly sewn into the lining of the coat, almost camouflaged against Barnaby's dark fur. The pouch was surprisingly compact, yet clearly contained something substantial. Richter leaned in, his breath fogging in the cold, his eyes fixed on Schmidt's careful movements. He offered no words of encouragement, only a silent, unwavering demand for precision and speed. The weight of his expectation was a heavy burden on Schmidt's shoulders, but the private understood the gravity of the situation. This was no longer about a stray dog, it was about potential intelligence, perhaps even a threat to their very lives. The air around them grew thick with unspoken questions. What could be hidden within that pouch? Was it a bomb? A crude map? A coded message that could unravel their current tactical position? Each soldier held his breath, their weapons still aimed, ready to react to any sudden movement, any unforeseen danger that might emerge from the dog's coat. Barnaby, remarkably, remained still. He seemed preternaturally calm, almost resigned, as if he understood that this examination was an unavoidable step in his arduous journey. His intelligence, once merely a charming trait, now seemed to elevate him to a knowing participant in this high-stakes drama. It was as if he recognized that the contents of that pouch held a significance far greater than his own comfort or fear. Finally, with a last snip of thread, the pouch was fully exposed. Schmidt carefully pried it open, his fingers brushing against a stiff, oddly crinkly material within. The tension was almost unbearable. Richter's hand instinctively went to the holster of his Luger, though he knew a pistol would be useless against whatever might be inside. The other soldiers gripped their rifles tighter, their knuckles white. The cold wind, which had been a constant companion, now seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Schmidt, his face a mask of concentration, reached into the pouch. His fingers closed around a small rectangular object. He withdrew it slowly, deliberately, revealing a carefully wrapped package, tightly bound in oilskin. The material was slick and waterproof, designed to protect its contents from the unforgiving elements. It was clear, even before it was fully unwrapped, that whatever was inside was considered immensely valuable, worth safeguarding with such meticulous care. The package was about the size of a small book, perhaps a little thicker. It bore no markings, no symbols, nothing to betray its origin or purpose. The oilskin itself glittered faintly in the weak winter light, shedding tiny flakes of ice that had adhered to its surface. Schmidt held it up for Richter to see, his eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and awe. Richter stared at the package, his mind racing through countless possibilities. His military training, his years of experience in counterintelligence, all converged on this single moment. He had seen similar packages before, though rarely so cleverly concealed. This was the real thing. He knew it instantly. This was no ordinary find. This was something significant, something that could alter the course of their operations, perhaps even the war itself. The silence stretched, heavy and profound, broken only by the distant groaning of artillery and the whistling of the wind. Every man present felt the weight of that oilskin-wrapped package, understood implicitly that they stood on the precipice of a revelation. Barnaby, the unwitting carrier of this secret, remained still, his gaze fixed on Schmidt, as if waiting for the next command, the next turn in his incredible journey. The package, mundane in its appearance, hummed with an unseen power, a secret yet to be unleashed, capable of turning the tide of battle, or perhaps simply changing the fate of a lone, desperate Collie. The reveal was complete. The contents, however, remained a mystery, cloaked within layers of oilskin and unspoken dread. Under Richter's intense gaze, Private Schmidt, his heart still thrumming with a mixture of fear and burgeoning affection for the Collie, carefully took out his small, utilitarian army knife. The blade, honed sharp from daily use, glinted briefly in the weak winter light. He knelt beside Barnaby again, his movements deliberate, his expression grimly focused. The other soldiers, now acutely aware of the potential danger, had formed a loose semicircle, their rifles held at the ready, pointing not directly at the dog, but in its general direction, a silent testament to their unwavering vigilance. Barnaby, sensing the renewed apprehension and the focused attention on him, remained remarkably still, a quiet sentry amidst the armed men. He watched Schmidt's hands with an intelligent, almost knowing gaze, his earlier whimper replaced by a stoic endurance. Schmidt's fingers, surprisingly gentle despite the tension, located the thick, almost invisible stitching on the underside of Barnaby's belly, perfectly camouflaged by the dense fur. He carefully inserted the tip of his knife beneath a loose thread, applying just enough pressure to sever it without harming the dog's skin. The silence of the desolate landscape was absolute, broken only by the soft, rhythmic rasp of the blade cutting through the tough fabric. Each snip felt unnaturally loud, a jarring sound in the stark quiet. Slowly, meticulously, thread by thread, the seam began to unravel, revealing a small, flat pouch expertly sewn into the lining beneath Barnaby's coat. The craftsmanship was undeniable, a testament to the enemy's resourcefulness and their deep understanding of clandestine operations. This was no amateur job. Richter, his face etched with a mixture of suspicion and growing anticipation, leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Schmidt's hands. He had seen enough of war to know that the most innocuous things could hide the deadliest secrets. He half expected a ticking device, perhaps a miniature explosive designed to detonate upon discovery, or a vial of potent poison. The thought sent a jolt of ice through him, but his training held firm, his poker face unwavering. His orders were clear: investigate. The lives of his men, and potentially the outcome of their current offensive, hinged on what lay hidden within this dog. The rest of the patrol mirrored his intensity, their breaths held, their muscles coiled. The cold wind bit at their exposed skin, but no one moved, no one shivered. All attention was fixed on the small furry courier and the secret it carried. Finally, with the last thread cut, the pouch opened. Schmidt, his movements slow and deliberate, reached in. His fingers brushed against something cold and smooth, wrapped in multiple layers. He withdrew a small, tightly bound package, no larger than his palm, encased in oilskin, a waterproof material, clearly intended to protect its contents from the harsh elements and the dog's own bodily functions. The package was surprisingly heavy, suggesting dense materials within. He held it up, a small, dark bundle silhouetted against the pale sky. The tension in the air was palpable, almost suffocating. Every soldier's weapon remained trained, every eye riveted on the package. Barnaby, sensing the culmination of the process, looked up at Schmidt, then at Richter, a quiet plea in his eyes, as if asking for permission, for understanding. "Careful, Schmidt," Richter warned, his voice a low growl. "It could still be anything. Place it on the ground, then open it." Schmidt nodded, placing the package gently on the snow-dusted earth. He then used his knife again, carefully prying open the intricate knots and layers of oilskin. The material, stiff from the cold, unfolded with a subtle cracking sound. Beneath the outer wrapping, more layers of waxed paper and cloth were revealed, meticulously protecting the inner contents. Each layer peeled back exposed another, building the suspense to an almost unbearable crescendo. This wasn't merely information. This was something supremely important, guarded with the utmost care. Finally, the last layer of protective covering was removed, and Schmidt carefully unfurled the contents. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't poison. It was something far more insidious, far more devastating than any physical weapon. Spread before their eyes were several thin, meticulously drawn sheets of paper. They were not just maps. They were highly detailed, intricately annotated maps of their own front lines. Alongside them were pages covered in precise, almost calligraphic script, troop movements, coded directives, and most damning of all, the detailed plans for a critical German offensive, scheduled to commence in the coming days. Richter snatched one of the maps, his eyes scanning the familiar terrain, then darting to the annotations. His jaw tightened perceptibly. Every strategic point, every hidden artillery position, every planned flanking maneuver was laid bare. This wasn't just intelligence. It was an entire blueprint of their upcoming operations, delivered directly into the hands of their enemies. He recognized the code words, the specific markers for their elite units, the precise coordinates of their supply lines. This was irrefutable, top-tier intelligence, compromised and on its way to the Allied command. The enemy had used a seemingly harmless, starving animal to transport vital information, right under their very noses, exploiting their humanity, their momentary compassion. The sheer audacity, the chilling effectiveness of the ploy was a gut punch. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This intelligence detailed a massive flanking maneuver planned for the upcoming offensive, a complex, high-risk strategy designed to encircle a significant portion of the Allied forces and decisively break their lines. It was a move that, had it gone according to plan, would have caught the Allies completely by surprise, potentially turning the tide of the war in that sector. Now, thanks to one scruffy Collie, their entire strategic advantage was gone. The element of surprise, the cornerstone of this critical operation, was utterly lost. They had been exposed. The enemy knew everything. Richter's orders had been delivered with an uncharacteristic urgency, a clear signal to everyone present that the stakes had dramatically escalated from a mere stray dog to a potential turning point in their current predicament. The hidden documents were swiftly secured, wrapped in the oilskin once more, and placed into a waterproof pouch carried by Private Schmidt, who was now regarded with a newfound respect by his comrades. He had, after all, been the one to coax the dog and ultimately discover its secret. The captain wasted no time. He dispatched two of his swiftest and most reliable runners, their faces grim with the weight of the intelligence they carried. They were to deliver the package directly to divisional command, bypassing all intermediate ranks, with an executive order from Richter himself demanding immediate attention. The messages were clear. An enemy flanking maneuver was imminent, detailed maps and timings were enclosed, and the element of surprise, which had been the enemy's most potent weapon, was now entirely theirs to manipulate. The runners disappeared into the swirling snow, their figures quickly swallowed by the vast white expanse, their mission critical, their pace relentless. As the runners vanished, Richter turned his attention to the immediate security of his remaining patrol, and surprisingly, to Barnaby. The documents had changed everything. What was once a seemingly innocuous stray was now a living, breathing testament to the enemy's desperate ingenuity, and more importantly, a critical asset. He organized a rapid perimeter defense, ensuring that their temporary camp, now a site of immense strategic importance, was secure. Communication lines were established, albeit crude and vulnerable, to relay news back to their front lines, warning of the impending threat. The mood among the soldiers had shifted from a weary resignation to a tense, almost electrifying anticipation. They were no longer merely holding a position. They were at the fulcrum of a major turning point, armed with knowledge that could shatter the enemy's grand design. The blindness effect of this discovery was profound and immediate. Across the lines, unknown to the German patrol, the enemy forces were meticulously preparing for their flanking maneuver. Their commanders, confident in their secrecy, were finalizing troop movements, coordinating artillery support, and rehearsing their advance. They believed their plan was impenetrable, their surprise absolute. But Barnaby's unexpected appearance, his unwitting delivery of their most guarded secrets, had ripped away that veil of secrecy. Their carefully laid trap was now conspicuously exposed. The element of surprise, the very cornerstone of their offensive strategy, was obliterated before a single shot had been fired in their planned push. For an attack of this magnitude to succeed, the enemy relied heavily on their target being caught off guard, unprepared for the direction and force of their assault. Now, that advantage was rescinded. Every feint, every diversion, every calculated risk they intended to take was laid bare. Their meticulously planned offensive, designed to exploit the German vulnerabilities, suddenly faced a fully informed and reacting adversary. The psychological impact of realizing their plans were compromised would be devastating. It would sow doubt, hesitation, and ultimately chaos within their ranks. Barnaby, oblivious to the profound ramifications of his silent courier service, remained close to Schmidt. He watched the flurry of activity with a detached curiosity, occasionally casting a glance at the now empty, torn seam in his coat. He was no longer a hunted, starving creature, but an unwitting agent of espionage, an instrument of war who had, by sheer accident and the instinct for survival, turned the tide. He had delivered not just intelligence, but a devastating blow to the enemy's strategic capabilities. The irony was not lost on Richter, who, observing the dog, felt a flicker of something akin to awe. A simple animal, driven by hunger and trust, had been instrumental in averting what could have been a catastrophic defeat. The cold wind whipped around the patrol, carrying with it the faint, distant rumble of artillery, a constant reminder of the ongoing conflict. But now, that sound carried a different resonance. It was no longer the sound of an unknown threat, but the backdrop to a battle they were now prepared to confront, a battle whose outcome had been dramatically swayed by a stray collie. Barnaby, the silent hero, had delivered the enemy's secrets, stripping them of their most crucial weapon, the element of surprise. He had, in essence, blinded the enemy, transforming their meticulously planned offensive into a predictable and now potentially disastrous gambit. The weight of this revelation settled heavily among Richter's men, galvanizing them, infusing them with a renewed sense of purpose and a grim determination. The war continued, but tonight, thanks to a dog, the Germans held an unexpected and potentially decisive advantage. The German command, once alerted to the bombshell intelligence delivered by Barnaby, moved with an almost unprecedented speed and efficiency. Runners, their faces grim with the weight of their duty, sprinted through the snow to deliver the intelligence to forward operational bases. From there, it was immediately radioed up the chain of command, sparking a flurry of activity that rippled through the entire sector. Maps were unfurled, marked, and remade. Tactical commanders, previously facing an uncertain threat, now possessed an almost clairvoyant understanding of their adversary's intentions. The planned flanking maneuver, meticulously detailed in the documents Barnaby carried, was no longer a shadowy possibility, but a stark, undeniable reality. Defensive lines, initially prepared for a frontal assault, were rapidly reoriented to counter the now exposed flanking thrust. Reserves previously held in various positions were redeployed to strengthen the vulnerable flanks. Artillery batteries, which would have been caught off guard by the deep penetration, were repositioned and given precise coordinates, ready to rain down fire on the unsuspecting enemy forces as they attempted their exposed maneuver. Counter-offensives, previously unplanned, were quickly drafted and prepared, designed to exploit the now compromised enemy positions. The enemy's grand strategy, intended to surprise and overwhelm, was instead met with a cold, calculated response. The impact of this intelligence was immediate and devastating for the Allied forces. As their vanguard units, confident in their unseen approach, began to execute the flanking maneuver, they were met, not with confusion and disarray, but with a disciplined, well-prepared defense. Artillery barrages, precisely aimed at their assembly areas and lines of advance, shredded their formations. Machine gun nests, thought to be bypassed, opened up with devastating accuracy. The element of surprise, which was to be their greatest weapon, had become their gravest weakness. Their advancing troops, once expecting an easy breakthrough, found themselves caught in a meat grinder, their movements anticipated at every turn. What was intended as a swift, decisive encirclement devolved into a bloody, costly stalemate, and eventually a forced retreat. Significant losses were averted on the German side, and the planned breakthrough for the Allied command was decisively thwarted, all because of the chance discovery of a scruffy collie. Captain Richter, surveying the reports of the successful defensive actions and the blunted enemy offensive, felt a grudging respect for the animal. He was a soldier, hardened by years of conflict, not prone to sentimentality. Yet, he couldn't deny the crucial role Barnaby had played. The dog, now fed and no longer shivering from the cold, lay by the warmth of a small fire in the patrol's makeshift shelter. His days of scrounging and fearing every shadow were, for the moment, over. Richter knew that in the brutal calculus of war, every advantage, no matter how it was gained, was invaluable. He understood that Barnaby was not just a dog. He was a silent testament to the unpredictability of fate, a living embodiment of the butterfly effect in wartime. He issued orders for Barnaby to be cared for. "He is to be fed, watered, and kept warm," Richter commanded to Private Schmidt, his tone brooking no argument. "He has earned his keep, and then some. A mascot, perhaps, but a hero nonetheless." Schmidt, who had been instinctively looking after Barnaby, nodded with a small smile, relieved that his newfound companion would be safe. He had grown fond of the dog, seeing in its intelligent eyes a quiet dignity amidst the chaos. Barnaby, in turn, seemed to have adopted Schmidt, following him like a shadow, a silent companion in the grim landscape of war. The irony of the situation was a bitter pill for some, a moment of profound reflection for others. A starving stray, a creature on the very edge of survival, had been plucked from the icy grip of winter, and through sheer chance had delivered a blow to the enemy that battalions of men and mountains of weaponry might not have achieved. He was not a trained messenger dog, not a highly specialized agent, but a simple collie, driven by the most basic instinct for survival and the simple allure of a human's kindness. Yet his contribution had shifted the trajectory of an entire operational sector. He was an accidental hero, a silent, furry instrument of destiny who had saved countless German lives and thwarted a major enemy offensive. The narrative of his discovery spread quickly through the ranks, whispered around campfires and told in hushed tones in dugouts. It became a legend, a strange, uplifting tale in the midst of constant despair. Barnaby, the anonymous collie, had unwittingly become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the most desolate circumstances, unexpected salvation could emerge from the most unlikely sources. The war machines ground on, the sounds of battle continued to echo across the frozen landscape. But for one sector, for one small patrol, a new, unforeseen chapter had begun, ushered in by the quiet courage of a dog. The blindness inflicted upon the enemy by their own compromised intelligence had not only preserved German lives, but also demonstrated the profound, often inexplicable, influence of fate in the grand tapestry of human conflict. The little stray had carved his remarkable place in history, not through heroic deeds of aggression, but through a simple, unwitting act of delivery, transforming him from a victim into a pivotal figure, a true hero of the war. The immediate threat, once looming large and shrouded in secrecy, was now entirely neutralized. The enemy's planned flanking maneuver, meticulously detailed in the documents Barnaby had carried, became a blueprint for their own undoing. German command, armed with this invaluable intelligence, had moved with astonishing speed and precision. Defensive lines were reinforced at critical junctures. Artillery batteries were repositioned to intercept the anticipated assault, and reserve units were deployed to block the very avenues the enemy had intended to exploit. The element of surprise, which had been the enemy's greatest asset, had been decisively turned against them. Their elaborate trap, designed to ensnare the German forces, instead became a cage from which they could not escape without heavy casualties. The landscape, once a blank canvas for their strategic ambitions, was now a minefield of their own exposed vulnerabilities. Barnaby, no longer just a stray collie, had unwittingly etched his legacy into the annals of this brutal conflict. Private Schmidt, who had first extended a hand of kindness, now found himself inseparable from the animal. He had given the dog a name, a simple yet profound act that solidified their bond. Held, meaning hero in their language. Held, a name whispered with an almost reverent respect among the unit, was a constant, comforting presence. He would follow Schmidt on patrols, his keen senses often picking up distant sounds before any human ear could, his presence a quiet reassurance in the otherwise desolate and dangerous landscape. He slept by Schmidt's side, a warm, furry weight against the chill of the trench nights, a living embodiment of the unexpected good that could emerge from unimaginable hardship. Held wasn't just a dog. He was a symbol, a testament to the fact that even amidst the chaos of war, acts of kindness and extraordinary fortune could intertwine to alter the course of history. The story of Held, the unassuming Collie who delivered the enemy's secrets, spread like wildfire through the German ranks, elevating his status from mere animal to a legend. He received extra rations, a luxury in those lean times, and even a custom-made insulated bed in the officers' quarters, though he consistently chose to remain by Schmidt's side. The dog, once emaciated and fearful, had transformed. His coat gleamed, his eyes held a knowing intelligence, and his tail, once tucked in fear, now wagged with a gentle, dignified rhythm. He had found not just sustenance, but companionship, not just shelter, but a purpose. He became the unit's unofficial mascot, a quiet morale booster, reminding them that even the smallest, most unexpected actions could yield monumental results. This tale, seemingly plucked from the realm of fable, serves as a poignant reminder that heroism isn't exclusive to the decorated soldier or the brilliant strategist. It can manifest in the most extraordinary ways, through the most unassuming beings. Barnaby, or rather, Held, was a creature of instinct, driven by hunger and a primal need for safety. Yet, his simple journey, his unintended role as a courier, had a more profound impact than countless meticulously planned military operations. He didn't understand the intricacies of troop movements or the strategic implications of flanking maneuvers, but he understood trust, and in that understanding, he fulfilled a destiny far greater than any stray could ever dream of. He became a silent victor in a war that consumed millions, a beacon of hope in a landscape of despair. His story compels us to reflect on the nature of courage, resilience, and the unpredictable turns of fate that shape our collective history. Imagine the sheer determination of this dog, traversing unforgiving terrain, surviving against all odds, only to stumble into a German patrol and inadvertently change the course of a battle. It's a narrative that transcends the mundane, touching upon the magical and the miraculous within the grim reality of wartime. Held's warm presence, a constant reminder of their stroke of luck, continued to be a source of quiet comfort for Schmidt, a tether to a world beyond the trenches, a world where loyalty and an unexpected delivery could forge an unbreakable bond. The war, with its endless horrors, had also, in a strange twist of fate, offered a glimpse of the extraordinary, confirming that heroism, much like life itself, finds a way to blossom in the most barren of grounds. This incredible narrative of how a stray collie, through sheer chance and circumstance, became a pivotal figure in a major intelligence coup, forever altering the outcome of a critical battle, truly highlights the unexpected threads that weave through the tapestry of historical events. It's a testament to the unforeseen impact of even the smallest creatures in the grandest of conflicts. If Barnaby's astonishing journey from a starving stray to an accidental wartime hero has captured your imagination and stirred your emotions, please take a moment to show your appreciation. Give this video a like and share your thoughts on Held's incredible story in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives on these forgotten moments of history. And for more captivating tales from the past, filled with intrigue, courage, and unexpected twists, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. Join us again as we uncover yet another intriguing narrative from the annals of time, exploring the lives and events that shaped our world. Goodbye for now, and remember, history is always more fascinating than fiction.